All right. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us today for the Ultimate Battle Card Breakdown. My name is Maggie, and I will be your moderator for today. Before I hand it off to our host, Eric, just a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send it to you within 24 hours after the session via email. And feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat box. We will try to get to as many questions as we can if time allows at the end. If for any reason we don't have time or we don't get to your question, we will have somebody follow up with you. So feel free to throw any questions you have right there in the chat box. But yeah, so that about covers it. And just a reminder, it is being recorded. You will get an email. We had lots of questions about that. You can send it out to others on your team. So without further ado, I will pass it on to our host, Eric.
Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Manser, and I am the VP of Product Marketing at Crayon. And I'm so excited to be here and presenting to you the Ultimate Battle Card Breakdown webinar. Now, one of the best parts about webinars that I've been a part of, and I've been fortunate enough to play a role in, is that the ones that are a little bit more unscripted, the ones that are a little bit more open discussion, like back when we used to go to conferences and go to trade shows, and you'd see those roundtable discussions that are a little bit more off the cuff. So there is not a group of individuals who have a prepared script for today's webinar. There is not a PowerPoint presentation that four gentlemen have poured over. This is going to be a true conversation amongst three of the best in the industry at battle card tracking, creation, or activation. And I'm stoked to be able to bring you these three individuals in for a rousing discussion about not only the best practices for creating and activating battle cards, but also a hard target critique of some sample battle cards where you'll be able to see those best practices and perhaps worst practices in practice itself. So let's start by bringing on one of our panelists. He is sort of our industry veteran when it comes to competitive intelligence. He has held positions all over the marketing spectrum, but he really found his product marketing niche a little over 6 years ago. He's owned messaging, he's owned go-to-market strategy, and now he's the guy that's in charge of CI for his company. Currently the senior product marketing manager at Salsify, joining us from just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Please welcome Nathan Teplow. Nathan, turn your camera on and say hello.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Eric, for the intro. Excited to be here.
A little icebreaker question for you, Nathan. What is your favorite season of the year and why?
Favorite season of the year? I'm going to go with summer. I like the heat. I like the long days, like being by the pool. I always miss it in the winter. So I'll go with summer.
I love it. I love it. Here's our next panelist. He's sort of the industry disruptor of our group. He's had jobs most people would, quite frankly, dream of. He worked at 18 Birdies, which is a leading golf GPS app. He founded his own coffee company so much time ago. He's always looking for a cool cutting edge company, and his current role is in conversational intelligence, and that is no exception. He's currently the senior product marketing manager at Gong. He is sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley, California. Please welcome Elvis Lieban. Elvis, turn your camera on, say hi.
Hey, Eric. Hey, Nathan. Hey, everybody on the line. Glad to be here.
Elvis, little icebreaker question here. What is the TV show that you're currently binge watching or you are looking forward to binge watching in the future?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a TV show per se. I'm really into Formula One. I just went to the Formula One Grand Prix in Mexico this past weekend. So I'm looking forward to Drive to Survive season 4.
Love it. I love that. That's great. And our last presenter, last panelist is a senior sales leader, really providing a different perspective to battle cards, less on the creation side and more on the actual use case of it. He has been closing enterprise level deals for a very long time, including at positions at IBM, Quest Software, and Genesis. And now he's shaping hearts and minds in senior leadership positions as he has held for the past 15 years. Currently, he's the Senior Director of Mid-Market and Commercial Sales at Hootsuite, and there's a high likelihood either this man or one of his constituents, one of his people on his team have tried to sell to one or more of you. He's live from Toronto, Ontario, in the Great White North of Canada. Please welcome Hugh Ghods. Hugh, turn that camera on, say hi.
Hello, Eric, and hello, everyone. Thank you for that intro. It's amazing how it always sounds better when someone else introduces you. It just makes you feel that much better. But thanks for the intro, and hello, everyone online.
Hugh, what is your favorite professional sports team?
Ooh, being in Canada, you probably think it's going to be something Canadian, but growing up in England and being a big fan of soccer, I'm a massive Liverpool fan.
Oh,
So-
Nelly. How about
So-
that? I'm a Manchester United supporter.
Oh,
So
all right.
we're
This
just
meeting,
owing to the live nature of this webinar, we didn't realize this until just now. So this is fantastic.
all right,
Like I said,
normally it'll be meeting over, but that's okay.
owing to the live nature of this discussion, our next slide is a blank set of best practices. The next portion of what it is we're going to be talking about is specifically this. What are our best practices for battle card creation? And Nathan, I'm going to start with you. When you're building a battle card, what are some of your absolute must-haves?
Yeah, great place to start. I obviously love the topic here. I think there's so many ways that you can build a battle card. Like there's just so much that can go into it. There's so many different layouts. So I'm super excited just to talk about this in general. I'd say whenever I'm building a battle card, like you want your overviews, you want some like strengths and weaknesses, but I always try to think about it in terms of how do you play offense and how do you play defense against the competitor? You know, we're talking, sports and soccer a little bit here. Like I think competitive, drawing from sports, there's just like so many good parallels there. And you're always trying to figure out what's your opponent do really well, how can you protect against that and defend against it? And then how do you attack them where they're weak? And I think building that into your battle cards is really important. Another kind of methodology I try to adhere to is that when you're on offense, you want to make things as black and white as possible, right? Like we have this feature, they don't. Like make it very clear this is a differentiator, this is something unique. When you're on defense, you want to obscure and make it more gray. Like if they have something that you might not have, you want to have a response that's going to say, well, we can cover that through this use case, or we can certainly, accomplish that, or maybe that's not as important as you thought it was, some way to combat that and make it gray. So those are two things I try to keep in mind. And I want my battle cards to give our team the ability to play offense and go on the attack, and then also defend against where we know they're going to attack us.
I love that response, the sort of offense and defense thing. Elvis, do you think the same way when you're trying to craft a battle card message, this notion of, let's be proactive and reactive at the same time and offer outlets for each?
I think we have a little bit of a different approach to our battle cards and sort of how we think about it. In our messaging, in the general talk track we have for our product is leaning very heavily on leadership and examples of the leadership we have. So hopefully that's already baked in to the talk track, right? And we have that written through like all of our demo scripts too. Like this is where to pause in the demo and to say, hey, this is a unique feature that only we have. So when we think about battle cards, we actually mostly think about things like objection handling, right? What are the common objections that we get? What are some scripts and examples of talk tracks? So that's sort of how we think about it. We actually think a lot on the defensive side.
Got it. So you think about offense a little bit as proving out your bona fides, saying, hey, we're the market leader, or we happen to be a position of strength in this area, this area, this area. So when you think offense, you think, well, let's call it like it is. Let's say the things we're good at it befitting our position at the front of the space. And then objection handling is how you handle defense, right? It's how you address what you know is going to come up in case you have a competitor in the deal. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Hugh, as a sales leader, a former seller yourself, what are you looking for in a battle card that's going to help you close more deals? Is it an offense, defense? Is it bona fides? Like, when you hear a competitor mentioned on a call, what's the first thing you think to do in the first section of a battle card you think to address? Or does it depend on the context? I'm sort of curious to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, I think you look at it sort of two ways. One is in preparation. So you prepare yourself. The way I look at it is in every situation, and in no matter what you're selling and what company you're working for, there's a plethora of competitors, but there's usually the 2 or 3 key competitors that you're dealing with on a daily basis. So in preparation, number one, you need to be really well versed on the differentiations and the landmines and everything with those 2 or 3 competitors. That's from a preparation standpoint. From a reactive standpoint, that's another piece where where a battle card will allow you to sound really smart and sound like you know what you're talking about, but allows you to be very reactive very quickly to potential landmines that other competitors have put into the mind of your prospect. So if you are well versed on the terminologies that your competitors use, and if your prospect is using those terminologies, you should be able to really pick up on the fact that those are landmines that your competitor has thrown in. And if that's sitting on a battle card for me, and I've seen that, you know, that information's right there. And if they're using a terminology that we do something a little different, it's just they're calling it something else, and they're telling that prospect that we're not able to do that, then it allows me to be very reactive really quickly. So two ways. One is to be proactive, be ready, and then the second is to have that ability to be very quickly reactive to landmines that you hear in your conversations.
Hugh, I'm going to double click on that first point, if you don't mind. You mentioned this notion of, I mean, I think back in the day when enterprise sellers were on airplanes flying all over the country and literally sitting in front of their prospects in a conference room, a battle card was basically a training tool. You mentioned preparation, probably the last thing they look at in their rental car before they walk into the office park, right? But what you're alluding to is that a battle card can still be that and be a second screen reactive play when a BDR or an account executive is on a Zoom call now and they can have that second screen. You're saying now that a battle card can be both things. It just has to be in the right places, in the right locations.
Yeah, and it's super important to be, you know, you proactively prepare. So you're very well versed on the big picture. And I love battle cards to be a long version and a short version. The long version giving you all the details that you need and you prepare, and then the short version where it's sitting right in front of you. And it's funny you mentioned back in the old days when I was selling, we would have it laminated. That little that little one pager would be something laminated that would be sitting right next to my desk, and it doesn't have all the information because I've already read all the information in the long version. But it's got the short ones. It's got the quick ones where I can just glance over when I'm speaking to somebody and I know exactly where things are. So that's what I mean by the preparation with a long version and a reactive with a short version.
Nathan and Elvis, you were both nodding when Hugh mentioned this notion of long version, short version. Is that how you're thinking about training tool versus real-time, either attack or defense strategy, right?
Yeah, that totally resonates. And I nod my head just because like I think that's one of the hardest things about battle cards is like what's the right level of detail. And it varies by scenario, right? Like that BDR who's just like hammering on the phone and just needs that quick reply when a competitor comes up. They need much different information than your enterprise sales rep who is in a highly competitive situation. You know, there's lots of different requirements. There might be an RFP that they're filling out. So it's just a different situation. You want to try to pack that all into one resource, but then make it easy to digest and find things. So I'm interested in any like feedback or best practices there on how to do that. I think the way we've handled it is create almost two different documents. We have our battle card for some of those quick hitters, and then we have a concept of a deep dive where it goes into more detail. It's kind of like a playbook, you could say, that has all of the same components of the battle card, but just goes a little bit level deeper in terms of like features and, you know, deeper descriptions and, you know, some additional traps and areas of caution and stuff like that. So that's how we've addressed it. But I think, again, it's the hardest part of battle cards is finding that right level of detail.
Elvis, I'm gonna hit you with that one, actually, that level of detail thing. You know, when you mention it, I think about the filmmaker Martin Scorsese, you know, Casino, Goodfellas, The Irishman. And whenever he wins an award or receives praise for his work, he always is immediately, the person he immediately thanks is a woman named Thelma Schoonmaker, who is the film editor that he's worked on every single one of his movies with, because he believes like the movie's only made better by the things you cut out, by the things you literally eliminate and don't have. So Elvis, like, what is the right level of detail? It's certainly going to vary, but what are some of the things that you deliberately leave out because you want a seller not necessarily to have that level of depth, or you want a customer success person to be able to go seek out an additional layer of depth if they need to? Like, what is the right thing to edit out when you're putting together a battle card?
Yeah, I really like the film comparison there, because I think a lot of movies that adapt source material well are cutting out the things that aren't necessary. Like V for Vendetta for me is like a core example of that for anybody who's like a comic book nerd, like also movie buff. Like you can simplify a narrative and tell the same story in a much more simple way. And I'm not going to say like I think about battle cards like I would think about it as a film editor, but there's definitely some editing that needs to happen in order to make sure you're at the right level. So like the way that we start all of the battle cards here at Gong is with something that says, just say this. And it's like a 15 to 30-second talk track of if a competitor comes up, this is just what you say, right? This is the thing that you should know. It's not necessarily a quick dismiss, right? But it's an answer, right? Like people get the question all the time, how do you compare against the competition? It's like, oh, what should I say? That's the first thing we have on the battle card is that. And then depending on the competition, it kind of waterfalls down from there in terms of how much detail we get to. But for example, like just one thing as a product marketer, that's one of my pet peeves that I try to leave out are feature comparisons, right? To me, that's going too far.
You're getting in the weeds, right?
You're getting way in the weeds. You're missing the point because you've stopped talking about value at that point, right? You've talked about you're buying the car. Do I want power windows? Do I want lane keep assist, et cetera, et cetera? I think it's missing the point, and that's sort of how we train. And I realize there's a tension, right? Because at some point you're going to talk to a buyer, somebody in procurement who needs to know. So I have all of those resources. They're just not linked on the battle card.
I want to take one of the things you just said, Elvis, and I want to throw it to Hugh before we get to examining and sort of forensically picking apart the first example battle card. But, you know, Elvis, you mentioned something really interesting that both Nathan and Hugh nodded around, which is that just say this section. Obviously something that product marketing, your branding and your messaging teams would obviously play a role in crafting that 30-second thing. Hugh, how much influence do you want your sales team, or perhaps you as a sales leader, in the just say this? I mean, you guys are the boots on the ground, the people who are actually quote unquote saying this. So how much do you want to have some measure of influence, or at least some feedback around what would go into a battle card, even in particularly in a section like that, where Elvis wants not a quick dismiss, but hey, if the competitor comes up, say this because we've pretty well vetted this, right?
Yeah, it's all about what we call the secret sauce. It's all about what are we very good at, and you know, being the experts in the industry is where we need to lean on. And so those are when you talk about lead in with this, we know we're the best at something, and that's where you want to double down on. And that's the secret sauce that we refer to. And I think that's what you're referring to, Elvis, right?
Yeah, I like the secret sauce. I think I might add that as a tile.
Yeah.
And before we jump, a great follow-up question just came up is, you know, what is included in the just say this section? Give me, you know, you don't have to give us an example, Elvis, or Nathan, if you've got a similar concept, like in that 30 seconds, what would you say as part of the just say this? Or Hugh, answer this as well. Like, what is the this in this, just say this?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's where it's all about differentiation. It's all about where are we so different and so better. That's
the secret sauce, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Elvis, you try not to get into feature for feature. So when you say differentiation, you're thinking industry leadership, bona fides, we were here first, we are the best, that type of stuff.
Yeah. So basically, just say this is. We get this question a lot, especially if it's a top competitor. Here are the reasons that people buy Gong over the competition. Just like 1, 2, 3, here are 3 things you should think about on why people would prefer our solution. And then we end like every just say this with discovery, right? Yep. Because nobody ever brings up a competitor just to bring up a competitor. Yep. There's more there. And so we need to learn some really important things in order to set up the rest of the competitive talk track. So like how familiar the prospect is with the competition is a really big one, right? Is this an objection of somebody who's like, I just Googled Gong competitors and I'm gonna say these to quiz the rep, right? Or is this like a real evaluation where, you know, they're required to vet 2 or 3 vendors? Because I think that's what you gotta figure out like very quickly as a salesperson is how big of a threat is this? And then you have to gauge that response based on how big of a threat it really is.
Nathan, I have to ask. I mean, I would presume that you at Salsify have something similar where, on your battle cards or within the broader scope of your competitive intelligence program, there's something that says, oh, if the competitor get brought up, you need to start asking additional follow-up questions to find out how far down the path these guys are with them. Is that also something that holds true for you as well?
Yeah, like yes and no. And I'm jotting down notes because I love these ideas, and maybe it's something we haven't quite nailed yet at Salsify. I think the challenge I have is like it can be so situational and circumstantial, right? Like, are you talking with a large company or a mid-market company? What kind of persona are you talking with? What competitor are you up against? What stage of the deal cycle is it in? So maybe we just haven't nailed that yet and need to be purposeful with like what this battle card is for. I think, Elvis, it sounds like you guys have a really good almost like mission behind your battle cards. Like, exactly what it's for. It's not just a place to throw all the competitive info that about a competitor. It's for a specific purpose, which I like, and I like those quick dismissals that you mentioned. So I wish I had more of a best practice here. I think the thing I've struggled with is like it can be so situational, and we try to give our reps that situational, fluency in a way where like we're giving them arrows in the quiver, so to speak, and then they can build out their messaging, their presentation, their traps around that versus like, here is a 1, 2, 3 kind of script or playbook for how to address every, a competitor in every situation.
So I'm going to call timeout right there. I think we've got a pretty solid list of battle card best practices just from this portion of the discussion. I want to use some of these. I want you guys to keep these top of mind as we delve into the second half of our webinar, which is actually taking some example battle cards and talking through a little bit about what they their vices and their virtues. If you were here with us at the start of the webinar, you saw that we started with a blank screen of battle card best practices, and a result of the discussion that we just had, Nathan, Elvis, and Hugh, and myself, we recognize that, look, you got to play both offense and defense on your battle card. You got to be able to, make them as black and white as possible, but be a little bit more fuzzy, a little bit more gray when you're on defense. Include talk track examples, like put some words into these sellers' mouths, because depending on how junior or senior they are, they may be looking at your battle card in a real-time space. But on the opposite of real-time space, it's preparation as well. As Hugh mentioned, this is a good battle card allows you to react quickly, but also become well-versed, almost like a training tool, a last look before you go into a conversation, just so you are pretty well-versed. You've done the training, at Carrington or at, where does Liverpool practice? At, I should know this. Anfield, yes. What is the right level of detail? You have to be the editor. It's going to vary on the situation, but you'd love to have it into one resource, but you don't really need to get in the weeds, get in the mud with feature comparisons. Just say this, something I think everybody on the call, all of our panelists said, that's a great call. Adding in the secret sauce, leaning into areas where that you are the best in the industry, and allowing for that to lead to more questions on your behalf to the prospect themselves. Like, more discovery questions, more question and answer, more customer needs analysis, just as a result of the fact that you heard mention of a competitor in the conversation. And then I think crucially, and this really, we'll reorder this by the time we finish our webinar to put at the top, have a mission to your battle card. What is the specific purpose? Why are we doing this after all? Because I think that's a really great way to literally start the process of creating a battle card, is knowing exactly where you want to get to and what you want your sellers, your customer success team members, whoever is consuming the battle card, to have this notion of where we go from here, what it is we're doing with all this in order to be successful. Great first half, guys. I think this was fantastic, and I'm looking forward to the second half, which is forensically dismantling, talking about the good points and the bad points of a particular sample battle card. And the first one, in terms of a medium, would be housed within PowerPoint. So here, if you can see my screen, is a vacuum cleaner company, vacuum cleaner X versus vacuum cleaner Y, and a battle card. You can see there's a company overview at the top. You've got some claims, how to respond from your competitor themselves, the products that they sell, so a little bit more deeper into the overview, and then weaknesses and sales trap questions. Nathan, what's one of the first things you see here that might be pretty good about this, and perhaps one that you're like, maybe I would have adjusted this, would have left that out?
Yeah, so it's funny when we were reviewing these before the webinar in preparation. I saw this battle card and I was like, this is my least favorite. Just gut reaction. That was my initial thought. And then I read into it in more detail, and I'm like, this has a lot of just good things, simply put, and organized well. And you know, we're selling vacuum cleaners here, right? It's not like enterprise software. It's not some big digital transformation initiative, complex, you know, sales cycle. It's, you know, it's a vacuum cleaner, and it gives very specific points on what they claim, how to diffuse those, and then areas that you can attack back on. And, you know, I talked about playing offense and defense. I think this battle card does a good job of laying that out in a simple way that makes it pretty easy for someone to follow and, you know, run that kind of play over and over. So I did kind of a 180 on this as I was reviewing it, because I was like, oh, this is just too overly simplified and doesn't have enough detail or whatever, just on like looking at the layout and then really thinking about kind of the problem and what's you know, put here and written here. I think it does a pretty effective job overall. So
I think you're calling attention to the fact that, you know, we talked about this as best practice, have a mission with your battle cards. And when we all work for software companies, digital transformation, you mentioned, sometimes those battle cards are going to be more complex. When you're talking about selling vacuums, you know, maybe the mission is just to sell more vacuums, right? So I think that's what we're touching upon with that feedback. Elvis, Hugh, any thoughts on this right off the bat? Elvis, we'll go with you first as a battle card creator yourself.
Yeah, so my first reaction to this is this actually covers a lot of the bases that I think are really important and things that I get asked to include in battle cards from our sellers, right? Especially like around the weaknesses and the sales questions or responses. I just want to give credit to this battle card. Like having the right questions to ask on the battle card can really change the conversation, right? And I think it's a really important tool to have. So I appreciate that. I think one point of criticism, you know, is sort of like the cards in PowerPoint, right? From a discovery, from you know, like versioning perspective, like this isn't ideal. And like I've done these myself, so like guilty as charged, right? We all have to start somewhere. But like how I would see this evolving would be, you know, into something that's a little bit more shareable, a little bit more updatable for the field.
Hugh, a media philosopher named Marshall McLuhan very famously said, sometimes the medium is the message. Do you agree with Elvis's thought that, gosh, having it in PowerPoint is kind of a pain in the butt for us as sellers? It would be much better to have it in a location where, and clearly one of the more weaknesses here is the lack of access, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because it goes back to my comment of I used to have it printed. And you know, this is exactly the type of battle card that falls in the reactive category. This is one where it's a quick summary, and Nathan, you hit it right on the head, and that's why you did a 180, is because it doesn't fit your typical what you would think is a battle card where it covers everything. But then once you go in and go through the battle card, you realize that all the important stuff is there. And this is what you want at your fingertips. And in a reactive mode to really quickly. I like some of the things in here. For example, it says copy and paste into emails, so it gives you instructions on things to do. The medium itself, the PowerPoint, I think we're in a day and age where whether it's PowerPoint or any other online document, you can version code it. You can have it always up to date and just make sure that it's always pointing to the right document. Even in PowerPoint, you can do that. But I just love the format because it's at your fingertips and it's just sitting there for any reactive actions that you may want to take.
I love it. Let's go on to the next example battle card. This one is housed within Google Sheets. It's over here. It's for Hooli, the fictional company in the show Silicon Valley. This one's a little bit more, and I know what Elvis is going to say. There's literally feature comparisons with tick boxes and check boxes. It requires the salesperson to know what, you know, if they can accurately describe their A/B testing features, et cetera, et cetera. You know, Elvis, we'll start with you. You know, best, worst practices with, to say nothing of the medium, the fact that's in Google Sheets, so it's always updatable. You know, what are your thoughts on Hooli versus Pied Piper?
Yeah, I think what's missing here is just the value or like the why do I care, right? And this is something that every product's going to have to face, is there will be feature differences, but not all features matter to all prospects. And so that's, I think, what's missing here is some of the guidance around that. And that's something I think that's actually like the hardest part to translate from product marketing world to sales world, right? Is how do you tie that specific feature to a pain or a need that the buyer has? Like, that's where the differentiation actually works, right? Just saying I have 10 features and the competition has 5, I don't think is getting that point home.
I like that.
How many times have you guys been asked for a competitive situation? A sales rep comes to you and says, I need a feature comparison chart of this competitor versus us. My prospect's asking for it. And I always I hit my head against the wall, because I'm like, well, what do they care about? Like, I can throw a bunch of arbitrary features up, but like, it doesn't matter to the prospect, then what's it going to do? So I totally agree with you here. Like, just a feature checklist is not going to show value, and it honestly, it commoditizes your product. It's just a race to the bottom. And then if they charge $5K less for this many features or whatever, it's just, all you're talking about is like a small price difference. So I think that's the challenge here, is it really sets you up to be commoditized and kind of a race to the bottom.
Hugh, there's a big section on this Battlecard about pricing. Do you want your sellers to get into this deep discussion over the reason why something was priced in a particular way? Would you prefer more context around pricing if pricing is presented in a Battlecard period? Like, what are your thoughts on some of these elements that we didn't see in the vacuum company Battlecard?
Yeah, this is the least of my favorite out of the battle cards, because I feel like it falls somewhere in between the two scenarios that I described. It's missing the mark on the reactive important information that we saw on the other battle card, and it's also missing all the detailed stuff that Elvis was referring to in the long term. Pricing is something that we take off the table. Our sellers don't talk price. So the last thing I want to do is bring price on a battle card and have them start comparing pricing. Feature comparison, again, is the wrong conversation to have with the buyers. We're selling on value. Nathan, you're bang on. Elvis, you're bang on. What does it matter to them? What do they care about what we do better when it doesn't matter to them? So, yeah, I think this is totally missing the mark.
But one thing this one does include, as opposed to the other one, is this notion of landmines, right? Like, it doesn't make it very explicit as to what you should say and how you should say it. It's a little light, but at the very least, it does provide some measure of offense, right? You're planting landmines in the prospect's mind around Pied Piper. Right? And looking by the nods, you agree that that's probably not a bad thing to have.
That one box literally is the greatest thing on this spreadsheet. And then everything else is noise.
Elvis, Nathan, anything else to add on the Pied Piper Hooli battle card here?
Yeah, I have a thing, but Nathan, if you want to jump in first.
No, go ahead, Elvis.
Yeah, so I think I do like that pricing is included. I agree with Hugh largely in that we shouldn't be talking about pricing. That shouldn't be like the primary focus of the conversation, because that commoditizes the product just like the feature conversation. But I think like on a CI, just like competitive intelligence marketing perspective, this is something that we should know and track and be aware of, right? Whether or not it belongs on the battle card, I think you could go back and forth. I include pricing just as a data point in the battle cards. But from a greater competitive intelligence, scenario, I think everyone in the company needs to know how we compare against the competition from a pricing perspective.
But if that pricing means something, right? Like, and I could be paraphrasing, I could actually be attributing this quote incorrectly, but I think it was Seth Godin that said that, B2B is just like B2C. You are selling to a person, except that person is spending somebody else's money. So having a take on pricing probably isn't a bad thing, at the very least, to say that we differentiate on pricing for this reason, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. And I think that's the right takeaway from this, right? It's not the price itself, it's not the number, it's the relative positioning. Are you a premium product? Are you a value product, right? And then how do you support that? Because I think they're both good talk tracks, right? I'm a premium product, this is why. It might be why Hooli has more features, right? That could be part of the talk track. Or if I'm selling a value product, I'm saying I'm cutting out all of the things that you don't need in the bundle and giving you a good price. Those are the value points we should be talking about pricing, not the dollar.
Yeah, and Elvis, you're bang on. Obviously, pricing, it's important to know what the pricing is. Yes, it's important to know what the feature comparison is, but it doesn't belong on this one pager. It belongs in that longer version that I was referring to. That's when you obviously familiarize yourself with that. But when you're talking about the one pager reactive, you don't need this on here.
I love it. Nathan, I'm going to start with you with our next battle card, which is, and look, we get high on our own supply around here. It is housed within Crayon, a software provider for competitive intelligence professionals. This one is a sample battle card for sales executives, account executives, specifically speaking about Marketo, a big marketing technology provider. Nathan, what are some of your initial thoughts when you were scrolling through the different sections here on a software housed battle card?
Yeah, so I mean, first off, just the ability to keep it up to date. That's something that we talked about here. I think that's hugely important. And I know there's components within this that update automatically, which I think is awesome. Like giving people a reason to come back to the battle cards because things change and there's recent news and stuff, I think is great. It's a great way to make sure they digest things and keep coming back to it. So I like that a lot. On the flip side of that, this feels a little busy to me as well. Like I don't necessarily know where to look. Like there's a lot of different colors and icons and sections, and it's kind of a lot to absorb and digest. So I think there's probably some layout improvements that could be made to how this is structured. And again, back to our point about with the film editors and how, taking things out are as almost important as leaving things in. There's probably some sections that we could clean up here, but at the same time, there are some really cool dynamic pieces that I think make this a lot more engaging, give buyers a reason to come back to it. That's super important, just to making not just like your team able to handle different competitive situations, but just better sellers, right? Like you see some of the Gong calls that are listed here. You see intel and news, like keeping your team more informed on what's going on in the market is going to help them sell better outside of just, yes, here's how you handle this objection, and here's how you differentiate from a specific set of features.
But what you mentioned, I think, right at the outset was this tries to be everything to everybody. This tries to be Hugh's long form training document and a short form let's respond quickly. And for that reason, it gets a little busy. Elvis, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think from the sales perspective is, am I on a call? Do I need quick access to something, or do I need to learn? Right. And to me, there's just a lot of words on here, and probably all this information is important, right? But some amount of structure or hierarchy would benefit this card for sure.
Hugh, there's one section.
I think going back.
Oh, go ahead, Nathan.
I was just going to say, just going back to the purpose too, like the Gong call, like no one's going to listen to that while you're live on a call, and you need that quick hitter. So having a purpose for the battle card, I think, is super important. That Gong material, like I find those super valuable as training mechanisms, as like helping the team understand like how to handle different situations. But if you're using this for quick hitters, it's just not going to apply for the battle card. So just wanted to call it one of our original takeaways there.
Hugh, there's a section on here that I wanted to ask you specifically about that literally says why we lose. So this is a section on this battle card that tells the viewer of it, ostensibly an account executive, the reasons why we may stumble and fall or step on a rake in the middle of the yard. Like what are the things that we trip over? Is that something that is of value to you as a seller, just to like, let's be honest with ourselves, this is the reason why we perhaps lose to this customer? And does that provide some value either in a pre-reading education side of it or in a real-time, I just heard somebody say this, we might be circling the drain, right?
Yes, super important. And remember that reactive shorter version is a summary of what's in this big one. So yes, it's 100% important. Everyone will tell you that to qualify a deal out quickly, it's super important. It's just as good as winning a deal. Well, not quite, but almost there. So knowing why we lose and knowing typically why we lose is super important. So then you can, during a discovery and asking the qualification questions, you can ask a few of those and realize that maybe this is not a deal that we want to go down on. I've got a quick question, and it just came to my mind and listening to both Elvis and Nathan. When you create this battle card, and you both discussed how there's a lot of detail and maybe it's not formatted right and there's a lot of information. Who is your audience? Who do you build it for? Do you build it for the sales team and only the sales team, or beyond?
Yeah, so this is something that we're working to improve. My primary focus is the sales team. That's who I think about most. We track the win rates against each competitor. Like, it's obviously very important and a major initiative for the business, right? But we have sometimes done that to the detriment of our friends in other departments. And so I think it's good that you're calling that out, Hugh, right? Because customer success has to defend renewals all the time. Don't forget about them, and the objections they get are going to be different, right? Product cares a lot. Yep. Right? But they don't need the spin, they need the information. So thank you for bringing that up. That's definitely something we should think about, just holistically within CI, but also with battle cards as those other audiences.
That's interesting because, and Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but different parts of your company, a battle card means something totally different. When Elvis brings up the product team, it's not a battle card, it's a competitor profile. It's a location for repeatable and updatable, feature and functionality information that helps them or stay ahead, right? So battle card can mean one thing to a sales team, but perhaps something entirely different, literally a shield against encroaching competitors for customer success and, helping affect a product roadmap for other departments, right? Is that true at Salsify as well?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, every department has different needs from, I think, a competitive standpoint, and it's important to be purposeful. I mean, even within our sales team, like we talked about earlier, a BDR has different needs than a new business rep versus an upsell rep or, the renewals. So, understanding the circumstances and building the battle cards with a purpose, I think is super important. I don't think we've nailed that yet. It sounds like Elvis is kind of working on a similar thing. Like so far, it's, we have a battle card as like our positioning against a competitor, but how do we give the right teams the right information within that, I think is important as well. So
one more battle card to go, and then we can wrap it up and perhaps get to some questions. And that is for Acme Corp. Again, not a real one. This one also housed in PowerPoint. This one also got a lot of information on here. Hugh, I know you saw this one. I know you made mention of the Hooli and Pied Piper one being your least favorite. So there had to be something about this battle card that you liked. What was one of those things?
Yeah, this how we win, potential traps, weaknesses. It's calling out, again, really good sort of areas during the discovery phase of the sales cycle to really realize, what type of opportunity we're dealing with here.
And I would say how we win is positive, right? We've seen other battle cards, even in these examples, it's all negative, negative, negative. It's defense, defense, defense. How we win, to Nathan's point earlier, is a little bit more proactive. It's like, hey, let's stand behind the things we do well. Elvis, to your point, we are experts in our field. That would be number one for your proving out the bona fides best practice, right? Would you say, both to the two of you on the product marketing side, would you say that's accurate as well?
Yeah, I think how we win is, of course, very important. And I think one thing that's like a criticism of mine for like all of these battle cards is I think they're missing one really important thing, right? How we win is great. That's about our product. That's about us. But I think in order to really take it to the next level, you need a customer story, right? You need social proof of what it means for the actual customer. So like in this case, we are experts in our field. We should tell a story. Huh? Yeah. Well, but we should also tell a story, right, about how that expertise makes a difference for our customers, right? So we worked with customer Y on an initiative based on our expertise, and this is the thing we accomplished with them for their business, right? And that's kind of like, for me as a marketer, that's one thing I'm always looking for, is like that story. How do we drive that home?
Nathan, thoughts on that?
Yeah, how do you defend it? That's super important. That's something we've been trying to build into our, I'd say, battle cards and framework in general. I know we've talked about like what goes on the battle card and what maybe goes into those deeper dives. Something that we've been trying to do is, we'll have our competitive differentiators against competitor A, and there are 5 key themes. And then within each one, we have, specific capabilities that we do. We invest in R&D at this rate, they invest at that rate, or we have a customer success model that does this, or whatever. It could be any number of things. We don't put all that into the battle card. We write the theme on the battle card, and then in the deeper dive, we go into some of those specifics so that if it becomes highly competitive, they can have those defensible statements and capabilities that they can point to that the competitor can't. So certainly, I think that's a great point, and something that we definitely think about. One thing I'll say about this battle card is I think it has the best template or like framework or sections, but probably the worst content within each one. And I found reading through some of the bullets here, it's very us versus them. Like it's we have this, they don't, and like we offer this and we do that, and we're experts and whatever, but it's not, there's no value to the customer. There's nothing about like what this means to the customer. Acme platform isn't scalable. Like, what does that mean? How does that impact you? What like why is that an actual weakness for them? So I think that's a point I just wanted to make. And then going back to the vacuum battle card, I think Elvis brought this up. Like the questions there were great, and I thought the way that they were written were very focused on you. Like you ask a question about how this impacts you, and I think this battle card could do a better job of tying the strengths, weaknesses, traps, and everything to the impact on the customer.
So you're saying, let's get away from the pettiness, right? Stop designing a battle card in a boardroom of angry sales reps. Start designing a battle card with the customer in mind. Is that what you're thinking about, some of the content that's in here? And Elvis is nodding yes. Nathan, I think that's where you're getting at.
Yes and no. I don't think the points aren't necessarily bad. Like we can be experts in our fields, but let's tie that to something that's going to help the customer. Like deep analytics. Okay, we offer robust tools and meaningful data. Like what's that going to help you do for your business? So the points aren't necessarily bad. It's just how you phrase it and tie it back into enabling a better like sales process.
So we got about 5 minutes to go. I'm going to head back over to where we started here, which is our battle card best practices. So everybody, all of our webinar attendees, if you got a Mac, it's Command Shift 3 will do a screenshot. Command Shift 4 will help you do a highlighted or captured screenshot. So make sure you get a hold of these. See if we can take some Q&A as well. But before we do so, Hugh, Nathan, and Elvis, anything to add to the best practices? This is some of the stuff we talked about earlier, and I think for each one of the battle cards we went through, we definitely talked about each of these bullet points as we saw them.
I think one of the things that it can also be added to best practices is, and depending on, again, if you're selling to different personas, what does it matter to them is definitely something that should be also included. I'm not asking for a different version of it. Like here's the version for this persona, here's the version for that persona, but just one or two things that's important to them specifically. So not a generic. I mean, in our industry, we typically sell to the same persona, but as we're diversifying and as we're selling across to different solutions, we need to get better at this. What matters typically to this buyer is not going to be applicable to our new sort of buyer.
You got 3 product marketers on the phone. Personas are our stock in trade. So you're not saying anything that is verboten. Trust me when I tell you that. But you're saying don't devote an entire battle card to a persona unless you really need to. Just make mention of the fact that you're selling to different people and perhaps their needs. To Elvis's point, what is the challenge you're trying to solve for? Perhaps that's going to be different on a persona by persona basis, and make reference of that if you can, either in the short or long form battle card.
Yeah, if it's important.
Yep, I love it. Let me leave this up on the screen so our attendees can take some screenshots. I'm going to take a couple of quick Q&As before we close this thing up. The first one being from Ned Moody. From back at 1:22 this afternoon in the East, what is the best way to tap into your team's collective knowledge about your competitors in order to codify on the battle cards? And what's the best practice for maintaining it over time? So really the first question is, what's the best way to tap into your team's collective knowledge? I got to go to the guy who works at Gong, conversational intelligence first, but Nathan, I'm going to hit you for next, and then Hugh. How do you tap into your team's collective knowledge on your competitors?
Well, I mean, Gong is a superpower in this instance, right? Because I can hear every competitive mention on every sales call. However, that's a lot of competitive mentions.
Right.
So there are a few reps that I have good relationships with, who I'll check in with or will volunteer information to me. And I kind of have like that small committee of people in the field that I rely on
I love it.
in order to hear those things.
Nathan, do you have your sort of council of wizards that you go to, or a couple of key sales reps that are, sponges for intel and will be able to issue them back to you, or at least qualify some of the things that you would have put on the ballot card anyways that you may have heard from other sources of intel?
Yeah, I definitely have my go-tos that I'll run either new messaging or differentiation tactics by, or ask them about things that they've heard in the market. I think tools like Gong are great. That's a super valuable resource for us. The other thing that we do is we run an internal newsletter of competitive updates. And one of the sections in there is field intel. So as things come in, as people share things on Slack or email or whatever, I'll publish that back into the newsletter so they get a little kind of visibility to the rest of the company that says like, this is intel from, ABC rep. So it encourages them to share more info. I find that's been a good tool. And like the more boots on the ground that we can get sharing stuff back to us, just the better our intelligence is going to be.
Hugh, there's a question in here that I think is really relevant to you from an anonymous attendee that says, hey, y'all, thoughts on product marketing or your dedicated CI team conducting live deeper dive workshop with sales? We talked about the long form and the short form. Do you as a sales leader and your sales team see any value with product marketing or competitive intelligence teams coming in and saying, here's a presentation about the competitor, here's the new stuff we know, and what is the cadence? How frequent would you want that if that was something that you guys embrace?
Yeah, so are we talking about a training with?
I think in the question it says, so you present the deeper dive and at the end say, hey, we also have a battle card you can use in deals. This attendee wants to avoid content dumping on sales, and perhaps adding the additional context of a meeting would be valuable. I think that's what they're getting at.
Yeah, and you can achieve that in a short meeting. It doesn't have to be a very long meeting. And I think this is where people just always assume a meeting is an hour long. You can accomplish that, and it's super important. And then accompanied by, here's the battle card, here's the short version of it, and here's the long version of it. But I think that is super important to do it live and have the reps actually, engaged as much as possible in that training. And frequency, you do it as often as things change, because if the content is no longer relevant, then that's when you need to update it. You don't just have it on a weekly basis just for the sake of it, but as you gather new intelligence. And the other way that we generally communicate any kind of a new thing is through our Slack channels, and we've got a channel dedicated to our competitive analysis, and that's where all the salespeople are on, and that's where anyone can speak up and share something new that they found out about a competitor, or our competitive intelligence team will update everyone with something new that they found.
Yeah, so you basically made Slack into not only pulling competitive intelligence up and out of the sales team, but also as a way to this questioner to push competitive intelligence back down. So it may not necessarily having to have a product marketer in a sales stand-up once a week. It could be just, hey, FYI, we got some new intel. Make sure you check out the battle card. Here's a link in the Slack channel.
Yeah, because our salespeople are speaking to prospects every day, and the prospects are sharing information with them every day. So they'll find out things a little quicker sometimes than any other individual.
To Nathan, Cassie Etman has a question. Thank you, Cassie, for attending. When you bring up creating a card for the product team to leverage, where do you draw the line between product research and a competitive product marketing manager's research role? That is to say that there's got to be a where the sand hits the sea with regards to what a product team member should do with regards to their own research and what a product marketer or competitive intelligence professional does for leveling up the entire organization. Do you see a line there, a line of demarcation where the product manager needs to start participating in their own competitive intel gathering or at least curation?
Yes and no. I think there's the line there is that the product marketer is probably going to use it more in a go-to-market motion. Like, how do we differentiate, because it impacts our pitch decks and our collateral and our messaging and all that. The product management person is going to use it to fill gaps and understand product investments. I struggle with this because you know, like there's so many different ways you can slice and dice this, and to manage, you know, a different battle card or resource for like a product management lead versus a product marketing lead, like, you know, then, you know, how fragmented are you going to go with this intel? You can only do so much. I think you could supply both product marketers and product management users with the same set of info and have them go and figure out, okay, I'm going to bring this to market. What are the differences? I'm going to figure out my roadmap. What are the, you know, differences here? So yeah, I'd be cautious of overextending yourself and over fragmenting how specific you're giving that intel. But there's different needs for, like, the two different people would use them different ways.
And really, if you can empower them to do some of the work on their own and
yeah,
give them access to your tools, or give them some insight as to how you do it, at the very least, you're sort of teaching a person to fish as opposed to just giving that person.
Exactly.
Right. I love it. Last question, then we are sending everybody home. Question from another anonymous attendee. What would you recommend for a SaaS company with hundreds of global competitors? This person has to manage many personas for hundreds of companies, and it's just this anonymous attendee managing this. How do they give every persona what they want in a battle card while still having time to make these and keeping them up to date? So it's really the question of, well, I compete with hundreds of competitors. How do you start narrowing your focus? How do you start doing the Thelma Schumacher editing, even at a competitor by competitor level or persona by persona level? Nathan, you're lit up in the box there. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say start small. Like, you don't have to build a massive battle card for every single one of these. Obviously, that's not going to scale. So, you know, maybe it's just kind of nailing that, you know, the just start with this statement that Elvis alluded to earlier. Like, just nail that for different competitors, different scenarios. Maybe it's a couple bullets on strengths, weaknesses for each one. And then I think finding ways to, like what we just talked about, teaching others to fish, right? Can you produce a framework that other PMMs or other product leaders or salespeople can fill in and help, you know, create content for? Because again, you can only scale yourself so far and maintain so many different versions. So I would focus more on the framework and focus on starting small versus like trying to do a massive project for each one.
Hugh, your team members they might have 100 competitors, but not really competing against 100 companies, right?
No, and if you really have 100 competitors, at some point that you know, you can bucket them. Some of them sound and look the same. So, you know, to Nathan's point is, you pick your top 3, 4, 5 that are key, and they're the ones you're fighting with. You're not constantly. We probably have 50 competitors out there, but we really only deal with 3 or 4 top ones, and then, you know, secondary, we've got 3 or 4 other ones that we do battle card, but they start blending in, and you can bucket them if you really need to. That's how I would kind of look at it. Prioritize the key ones, and then just bucket the rest of them if possible.
Elvis, last word on prioritization, on thinking about your competitors in a more focused way.
Yeah, I think first of all, anonymous, I'm sorry. That doesn't sound like a great situation. I would definitely be super stressed out. It's a really tough position to be in, right? And I think the way that I would approach that is I would have to figure out how to prioritize, right? Whether it's going through, you know, CRM documentation on loss reasons, right? Or if it's polling the field and asking them who they're most afraid of, right? Like you would need to set up some kind of triage, right? Because at some point, like, you can't be everything to everyone and do every battle card for everything. You need to figure out like where the major issues are and fix those, and then get to the rest in time.
And with that, let's bring this in for a landing. On behalf of Nathan Teplow from Salsify, Elvis Lieban from Gong, and Hugh Ghods from Hootsuite, my name is Eric Manser, VP of Product Marketing at Crayon, and we cannot thank you enough for participating in the Ultimate Battle Card Breakdown webinar. Once again, the recording is going to be available to all of you after the broadcast, and we cannot thank you enough for attending live. Thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Eric.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.